Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Pathological monsters, cried the terrified mathematician. Every one of them a splinter in my eye. I hate the penal space in the coke curve. I fear the Cantor Turner reset. The Sapinski gasket makes me wanna cry. And a million miles away, a butterfly flapped its wings on a cold November day. A man named Benoit Mandelbrot was born. His disdain for pure mathematics and his unique geometrical insights left him well equipped to face those demons down. He saw that infinite complexity could be described by simple rules. He used his giant brain to turn the game around. And he looked below the stone, saw a vision in his head, a bulbous pointy form. Picked his pencil up and he wrote his secret down. You take a point called C in the complex plane. Let Z1 be Z squared plus C. Z2 is Z1 squared plus C. Z3 is Z2 squared plus C. And so on. If the series of Z should always stay close to Z and never trend away, that point is in the Mandelbrot set. Mandelbrot set, you're a Rorschach test on fire. You're a Dayglow pterodactyl. You're a heart-shaped box of springs and a wire. You are not that fractal, and you're just in time to save the day. You can change the world in a tiny way. Change the world in a tiny way. Mandelbrot's in heaven. At least he will be when he's dead. Right now he's still alive and teaching math at Yale. He gave us order out of chaos. He gave us hope where there was none. His geometry succeeds where others fail. And if you ever lose your way, a butterfly flaps its wings on a cold November day. A miracle will come to take you home. Take a point called C in the complex plane. Let Z1 be Z squared plus C. Z2 is Z1 squared plus C. Z3 is Z2 squared plus C. And so on. If the series of Z should always stay close to Z and never trend away, that point is in the Mandelbrot set.
That was beautiful. Have you sent this song to Benoit Mandelbrot?
Now a reading from the book of The dragon, Drago, has dryness, alien heat, and a certain fiery imbalance in it, but its flesh is not fiery inside. Its breath is so strong and sharp that it immediately ignites when it comes out, just as fire does when it is lured from a stone. It has a strong hatred for human beings, and according to its nature, has diabolical arts in it. Sometimes, when it sends out its breath, airy spirits from its breath stir up the air. Everything in its flesh and bones is harmful for human medicine, except its fat. When the dragon sends out its breath, its blood is dried up and not fluid. When its breath is within it, its blood is moist and flows, whence there is not even any medicine found in its blood. A person who has a stone in him should take some dragon blood and put it in a damp place so that it gets a bit moist. He should then place the blood in pure water for a short time until the water takes some heat from it. Having removed the blood, he should drink a moderate amount of that water on an empty stomach. He should soon eat some food. He should do this with the blood and water for 9 days, and the stone in him will be broken up by the strength of the blood, and he will be liberated. No one should eat or drink any of this blood, pure and simple. If he were to do this, he would immediately die. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Where did you get that quote about dragons?
That is from Saint Hildegard von Bingen's Physica, which is a book I have right here.
Oh,
translated from the Latin by a nice lady called Priscilla Throop. Because I don't read Latin.
You gotta send that to me. I was talking about dragons with several people this week, actually.
See, the universe, God is giving us clues through synchronicities.
I want to talk about dragons. Maybe not today, but we need to talk about dragons.
She has a section here about crystals and how you can heal yourself with crystals, because crystal magic is trad. And watercress, how to cook a squirrel. The box tree, how to use oak for medicine. Topaz, sturgeon, seal, sparrowhawk, bear. All kind of good stuff. Copper, silver.
Is this the medicinal purposes of all these things?
Yeah, she wrote a hand guide called Physica, which was physics back then. She broke it up into 9 sections: plants, elements, trees, stones, fish, birds, animals, reptiles, and metals, and how you could use these things for different medicinal purposes. And also just a little bit of folk knowledge about them, like what squirrels do and why they are the way they are.
Sweet.
Like deer are hasty, and a deer has hasty heat in it and cools off. She always talking about the heat something has, which I guess is an alchemical thing.
Well,
I don't know.
That sounds like traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah, it's all the same.
A lot of that stuff she was saying.
The Chinese just stole it from the Germans.
I always suspected.
It's true. It's true. Good morning, everyone. That was a song by Jonathan Colton.
About Mandelbrot?
Yeah.
Cool.
Are you familiar with the Mandelbrot set?
I mean, not really, but sort of.
Yeah. Mandelbrot was a French dude. Was he French-Canadian? I don't know. He was one of those. And he came up with, he basically invented fractal geometry, which was very useful and pushed the envelope in a lot of ways. But it also comes with associated problems that have yet to be addressed.
Interesting. No, he did this. He was looking at trees and the patterns of how they grow and all that stuff, and tried to put some math on it. Isn't that the story?
Yeah. So he was looking at tree branches, and he realized that as a tree branch branches outward, it's basically just repeating the pattern it was doing down below. Right.
Right.
So he saw that, like, as the tree comes up out of the ground, it branches into these big branches, and those branch into little branches, and those branch into little branches. And his thought was, well, that's the same process, just over and over again at different scales. And he also saw this on the coastlines, like the way a coastline goes. And he figured you could do that with anything. And he said, why should geometry be defined to just regular shapes? Why couldn't we just make it about anything? And he did, and he invented a thing called the Mandelbrot set, which was his proof of concept, which is quite beautiful. You can see it. You can see zooms of this online on the YouTube, which is this sort of bulbous form. But anyway, it's as you heard in the song, it's that you take a point called C in the complex plane. That's Z1 BZ squared plus C, and Z2 BZ1 squared plus C, and Z3 BZ2 squared plus C, and so on. If the series of Z should always stay close to C and never trend away, that point is in the Mandelbrot set. Right?
Right.
And you color the points by how fast they trend away from C or how slowly, like a heat map.
Mm-hmm.
And you get these beautiful patterns that recur forever and ever and ever. And you can zoom in on a Mandelbrot set, down and down and down and down, and you'll eventually come right back around to where you started. Back to the same boulder. And you can do this. People have done this with zooms of like 10 to the 1,000 or whatever. You just zoom for hours, and you just go through, and you'll find all kinds of interesting shapes. It's basically an image. We've created an actual image of eternity, because it's infinite in either direction, but it's also self-contained.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. But anyway, we're going to talk about that today and some other stuff. But you see this?
No, your camera's not on.
What? Video. Enable. Can you see me now?
I can see you now.
I have this. It's a Kids Roar vitamin C drink.
Sweet.
No, it's not, because I usually drink Sobeys, the Sobe drinks.
Uh-huh.
The one called Citrus Energy Elixir.
Just so the listeners know, Sumo is the last person holding up the Sobe brand, like Atlas holding up the world by his consumption.
And this week, yesterday was hard on me, and today, because, if you made a heat map, if there was some enterprising youngster out there who wanted to figure out my exact location, you could probably make a heat map of Sobe purchases per capita and sort of find the general area I'm in and where I frequent. But apparently the bottling store, because I went to my 4 or 5 places that stock them just for me yesterday, and who've told me they do just for me. And they said, we don't have them because the bottle company had a COVID thing and they had to shut down for a minute.
Oh, no.
And so this is the first time COVID has actually affected me in like a personal way.
I'm sorry for your loss.
I know. I feel like I have basically been on a ventilator. It's like when people talk about their suffering, it's like, well, yeah, I'm with you now. Where's my ribbon?
What if there's some chemical that they only put in Sobe that you're now withdrawing from?
I mean, probably so. What happened was I went to a Leonard Skinner concert when I was like 19.
Mm-hmm.
And we stopped at the store in the ghetto afterwards for like some water. And it was like 2 a.m. And they had a Sobe beverage there called Sobe Wisdom, which I loved. And then I was just drinking them ever since, except they discontinued Wisdom and renamed it Energy, but it's pretty close to the same thing. And so, I have felt the wrath of COVID too. Mm. We've all sacrificed in various ways.
Indeed.
And I wear a little ribbon now. I'm gonna get a little ribbon, and it's gonna say COVID survivor on it, because I have been also harmed.
That is both stunning and brave.
I am stunning and brave. Thank you. Yes, it is. So I feel like we're going too fast. What's up with you?
I don't know. No. Been talking about dragons all week.
Can we announce our thing or no?
What's our thing?
Well, how we may move to a thing.
Oh, yeah, I think we can announce it. It's pretty official. Okay. Well, no, okay, I think we need to let them announce it first. We'll just tease the audience.
We may be moving somewhere.
Yeah.
With our digital space.
Indeed. Doing a little relocation, but it's going to be okay. Yeah. I'm going to make sure that your feeds are not interrupted. So don't have any
interrupted. Smokestack may play with the intro music though.
I might do a little. There may be some, small cosmetic updates to a few things. We're transitioning.
Yeah.
And it may get a little weird, make it a little, kind of.
I'm going to transition to someone with slightly better audio quality.
Yep.
Only slightly though.
We're going to get slightly better audio quality.
And I'm going to try to sniffle less. Like I do. But only a little bit. And we have other good things.
I've gotten used to that because I live in a house full of sniffers anyway, with allergies.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even faze me. I wonder how the audience feels about it.
I don't know. I don't usually listen to the show, but occasionally I'll turn it on and see like how are we sounding.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the first 5 minutes of every show, I just hear me going, mouth noises.
Should blow your nose before we start.
This is what everybody wants.
Right.
Here.
It's good podcasting.
It is. Well, I figure, it's real. We're not those fake plastic podcasters.
Yep.
Who have gel in their hair.
Mm-hmm.
And also video. And also very large audiences.
Our sinuses are just normal sinuses. They're not big and clear,
Yeah. So we're good, and it's gonna be fun. So anyway, look, your metaphysics is based on your physics. Does anyone disagree?
I don't know if I disagree.
Is there anyone? Look, okay, so in the ancient Greek and Latin world,
well, hang on.
Yeah.
If we're gonna start a big topic, we got to do mailbag first. I got mail piling up.
Oh yeah, we got mail
from our listeners.
Oh yeah, we got mail from somebody that's.
So this is why we never have a show plan. It's because if we do make a plan, it's forgotten within 30 seconds of starting the recording.
I know. Okay, continue.
Okay, so our listener Ron Swanson sent me a great article about who are the Proud Boys. And I'll link that in the show notes. But one of the key takeaways is that a very qualified expert on right-wing extremism named Amy Cooter, who may or may not be friends with Wayne L. Sexton, is cited extensively.
You see, it's all why it's like, what is the statistical odds that everyone that writes about people in this space or talks to people in this space has a name that rhymes with something sexual? Seems very unlikely.
So, if you want to investigate probably made up Amy Cooter, you can click the link in the show notes and scope that out. And he also suggests that we rename our show the Mystical American Provocateurs Society, because that's a little more accurate with what we're doing. I disagree and think it's a terrible idea, but, if you send us mail, we'll probably address it, even if it's dumb.
Well, here's the thing. One, we're not provocateurs. And two, if we were going to rename our show, it would be because the acronym MAPS is known by some people to also be minor attracted persons.
Yeah, it's kind of an issue.
It's an issue, but see, here's the thing. People bring this up every once in a while. Like someone mentioned it on Twitter this week. And I was like, my problem with that is, one, I don't think that acronym is going to stick around very long because I don't think anyone outside of like weird Twitter knows about it.
True.
I don't think the only people that would connect a map with a minor attracted person is someone on the weird sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I don't want to give them a different label than just, pedophile.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to concede the ground. So one, I think that will fade away and we'll just be maps on our own. And again, two, I don't think is really real now. And three, I sort of just am like, well, whatever. Who cares? But so those would be somewhat legitimate reasons to change the name of the show, not because we're not what have we provocated?
I don't know. Maybe we provoked Ron Swanson a little bit.
You know what it is? Ron Swanson is that guy that cut off that teacher's head in France.
Yeah, we did. We provoked him.
We accidentally radicalized him.
Yep. I'm going to get up in Ron Swanson's face and provoke
everybody.
him.
Look.
Ron Swanson, do you want to fight, dude?
Keep your beheadings to a minimum.
It's now become my personal goal to fight Ron Swanson.
Yeah, okay.
I'm coming for you, dog. How's that for provoking? Okay, I'm just kidding, Ron. We appreciate you around here. So second letter, on a little more serious note, from listener Culture Builder, who was listening back to episode 15 about community, life, and has evidently experienced some loss lately, and kind of sent me a little letter saying, what do you do if you've been building culture with someone for a long time, working side by side, building a strong community, and they just one day up and leave, and you don't really understand why, or you don't think that the answers you've been given are legitimate. How do you process that, and how do you deal with that? And that's a tough question.
Ron didn't send this one. Who sent this one?
No, this is Culture Builder.
Well, Culture Builder, you face an issue that a lot of people that start cults face, which is that your original founding people stray. Like I remember, actually, in all seriousness, the Paul Wagner, if you're familiar with him, Wagner, like Waggner, he has YouTubes on this topic. And Paul Wagner is a interesting fellow. I don't know that we'll call him a good fellow, but he's an interesting fellow. A little bit of felonies. I like him. He has good country music, great country music in the true vein of Johnny Cash. Like his first album was called Failure Country, and has some songs on it called Love Is Death in Your Veins. It's about him and his girl shooting heroin together. And then he has one called There's a Grave Calling Your Name, about when he breaks up with a little lady and then kills her and buries her in the swamp. It's good old-fashioned country songs. But anyway, he also started Operation Werewolf and the Wolves of Vinland, which is a pseudo, what would it be? It's not really white nationalist, but they are all white people. It's like they are a biker gang. It's something in the vein of Hell's Angels, but focused around Germanic paganism and werewolves. Anyway, he's a nice guy, apart from the arson.
Okay.
And some of the other stuff. But I like him, He runs these chapters around the country now. It started with him and his brothers Matthias Wagner had a heavy metal band, and then they said, well, let's take this heavy metal band and turn it into a nationwide biker gang about Thor. And so they did. And they have a little place out in Virginia, and one in Washington State, where they get out in the woods and they've made a thing and they do blood sport and sacrifice and whatever. The stuff that guys do when they get alone. And so anyway, he has all these things talking about, well, what do you do if one of your guys up and leaves the group? And he talks about it very much in the vein of like a Blood talking about, what do we deal with a dude that is left trying to leave the Bloods, or a Crip that tries to leave the Crips? What do you do? And he's very open and honest about it. It's like he talks about his emotional upsetness about it, how he feels betrayed, how you can ward that off in the front by he's learned to screen guys, and he knows like who's going to stick it in long. He knows a lot better like who's likely to stick with it for a long time, and who's likely to stop becoming a motorcycle gang member in the future. And he talks about all these things and how you deal with that and the sense of betrayal. And you should look that up. It's pretty good. He's a smart guy, just a little intense. I
don't know that we've really helped Culture Builder.
I haven't yet. We're getting there. Okay. Helping him. Okay. I'm just saying, if you want some other perspectives, you should look at Paul Wagner.
I get just as a side note, I get the feeling that Culture Builder is a she.
Oh, same rule applies.
I'm just, so the motorcycle gang thing may not really.
There are women in the Wolves of Vinland.
Are there?
Yeah, they even have little families with kids now.
Yeah, I guess the pop's got to come from somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and so they get up. They built long houses in the woods, like Viking long houses. It's a very interesting story. I like him because he's an interesting guy who's done an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because I would be want to hang out with him and go try to spring the guy that burned down a church from jail from the group. But he's an interesting guy.
He
Smart
sounds
guy.
very interesting.
Yeah, smart fellow. Really good weightlifting tips too.
Well, good.
Yeah, but
Good.
So what do you do, culture builder? I don't know. Why did they leave? I wish we had more information.
Well, I think that I was thinking about this question, and that's what struck me is that you usually don't really ever know. When somebody leaves and breaks community with you, you kind of know, or you know some of it, but you don't ever really know in most cases. Right. And that's sad. And it's a painful thing, especially when you're working hard and you're trying to do something that's not just, hey, all my friends are on the internet. You're trying to build something like flesh and blood community.
Well, we're going to talk about that today too, because we're going to talk about 5th generation warfare after we talk about Don't Uncover the Nakedness of Your Father and the Psychology of Demons. But
I'm excited about that. Well, so you don't ever really know, and that's okay. And you're in the same place that you were before. Is that you're building a community with the people that God has granted you to do it with, and that hasn't changed, even though you experienced the pain of losing somebody that you've worked with before. So some ways, just carry on, culture builder.
Yeah, keep going. We're proud of you.
The Lord will provide what you need for your community.
In some ways, I think it's easier to build without you can't, or maybe you can't. I don't know. Paul Wagner was a try hard at it. I was gonna say it may need to happen more organically. And just let it form on its own. But then Paul Wagner was like, no, we're just gonna make a thing with like rules and stuff and I think people want to go 50-50, and that's where it doesn't work. You either need to let it form completely organically, or if you're going to try to make like a community, you're going to try to like on purpose, you need to do so with some element of like ritualistic oaths about it. Like you really do. Like, I don't mean like, it's got to be religious, but like, I know that one of the things that kept the wolves together, he said, is that they started doing blood brotherhood rituals where they would cut their palms and shake hands, like a thing with blood, and then it's like, and that really helped because if someone was willing to do that, they were willing to stick around for a while, and it also created a mental impression. That's probably why old tribes used to do such things.
Well, I know many churches, including the church that I'm a part of. It's when you join that church, you actually. There's a little ceremony of sorts.
Cut your wrist.
There's no blood, but you are making a commitment in front of everybody. Yeah. That isn't something you should break easily. And I get what you're saying there.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be as intense as like you can look up blood brother rituals by Jack Donovan. He talks about this.
Cool.
He's one of the wolves also.
Okay.
That's where he got this from. And they go through like all the stuff they do to cement their community together. And the gangs know this. Because a gang is like a very intense form of a community or a culture. Like the Bloods or the Crips or the whatevers. And they do all this stuff. They have like an initiation ritual. They have rules. They have some sort of a hierarchy. And I'm not saying that culture warrior needs to have a thing where anyone that joins her group, they need to gang up and beat down for a while. She doesn't need to have a jump in. She could maybe, but there needs to be something so that the expectations are agreed upon at the outset and set.
Well, I will note here that even if they're not violent necessarily, the most successful communities tend to be weird in some way to the outside world. So the Amish, the Orthodox Jewish community, the sovereign citizens. Good or bad communities, if they're going to be cohesive, they do have to be a bit weird, which is okay.
which is okay.
Which is okay.
I've never been good at community building. Like there's some guys that know how to, they just do things and they're like, hey guys, let's all get together and do this other thing.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, yeah, that's a great idea. Some people are just natural at organizing people.
Yeah.
And I'm not a people organizer. I'm like, hey guys, let's go. We're gonna get in the hot air balloon and scream chants over the rainforest. People are like, no. That's all.
Maybe it
No,
has to do with the subject matter, you know.
I know. But see, that's the thing. I never know what groups of people want to do.
Yeah.
I know what I want to do, but I seldom find large groups of people that want to do that at the same time.
Sure.
But anyway, I don't know. Was that helpful? Were we helpful? I don't know.
I think so. I think one thing that Culture Builder needs to keep in mind is that
Culture Builder, not
just
Culture Warrior.
because somebody leaves a community or it's not working for them anymore, it doesn't mean that the community isn't working at all. It's just not working for them.
Was the only other member.
But I guess so. I guess so.
Was it just her and one other person?
I'm not sure how many people. But, you know, if you still have a community, that means it's working and benefiting people still. And you can invest in those people and keep going.
Yeah, and sometimes people just need to, they just feel like they need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, get cabin fever.
Sometimes people are just like, look, I got to move to Wyoming. I just have to move to Wyoming or whatever.
Sometimes people feel like they have to escape their past a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And start over and feel like the only way to do that is to leave. And maybe that's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, there are sad but legitimate reasons for this thing.
Yeah.
So I think we helped out Culture Builder a little bit. I feel good about that.
Good helpers.
I mean, it got a little weird with the blood rituals, but you know.
Well, what are you gonna do? I'm gonna give us a applause. Good job. Good job, us. Good job, Culture Builder. Good job, Ron Swanson.
Yeah.
You also did it.
He did. Hooray. He was a part of that.
He's good.
Yeah.
He wins.
All right. So that was mailbag segment closed. If you have any mail for us, mapsoc.org is the place to send it. And we will talk about your deep personal yearnings on the air.
Deep personal. Yeah, give us, in fact, I want you to send us even more personal emails. Like, tell us something like really, you know, that we can really, really juicy and gossipy for the show.
Yeah.
Because it'll help drive more listeners.
It will. We're going to use your psychic pain for our advantage.
Psychic pain, your sordid affairs, the time you murdered someone behind the Arby's dumpster. Whatever it is, you know.
I didn't tell him that, Ron Swanson. He just guessed it. I swear I didn't tell him about the thing.
So just, you know, whatever it is, just send it in. Treat us like Dear Annie. And then me like Annie. I'm going to tell you about hot air balloons and blood rituals for your answer.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I was saying, so I sang about Mandelbrot. And then I read you from Hildegard van Brennen, who is she was like around the year 1000, somewhere in there, maybe 900s, maybe, but somewhere in that vein. And she was a Benedictine abbess in the Rhineland, a German lady, and she wrote a book called Physica, physics. About things like dragons and how to make sapphires weep so you could take their sweat and make them cure you of the dropsy or whatever.
Awesome.
And my point in doing so was to say, look, our metaphysics relies upon our physics, right? And so one of the things that I've noted is that the trad movement often is trying to force metaphysics from a long time ago onto the modern day. And they're very resistive to the idea that it needs to be updated, which I get. But like in Greek and Roman Latin times, what you would do is you would go to school and you'd study like history and music and stuff, and then you study physics, which was basically anything in the natural world, not just what we would today, but also like chemistry and stuff. That was all lumped into physics. And then after that, if you went on with your studies, you would study metaphysics, which means after physics. And that was stuff about the immaterial world, like God and theology and philosophy and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
But my point in saying that is that metaphysics comes after physics because metaphysics relies upon physics. Your inferences of the immaterial world rely upon your observations of the material world. So, and as physics changes, your metaphysical explanations for things may not make as much sense. They may not be invalid, but they may be less obvious. For example, I'm going to go straight into the most controversial one, transubstantiation, right? Which is the Catholic belief that when they do the Eucharist and the communion, that the bread and wine literally become the body and blood of Jesus. And they explain this via a metaphysics of involving what they call substance and accidents, which comes from Aristotle. And they say that though the accidents of the bread and wine have not changed, the way it looks and tastes and feels, the substance, what it is, has changed, right?
Right.
Which is fine, except for I have made the point that I don't think substance accidents metaphysics really makes sense anymore. And you need a different way to explain this. And people get mad because they identify transubstantiation with the dogma they're supposed to believe rather than the explanation for how the dogma works.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which is, they're two different things. Like you can believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, but be like, but substance accidents? What is that? Right?
Right.
So substance and accidents, if you're not aware, is substance was this idea that there's something a thing is, its ontology, and then accidents are just its qualia, its qualities around it. And Aristotle started this. So you have a chair, right? And a chair is a chair, but a chair might be made of wood, it might be made of wicker, it might be made of stone, it might be hard or soft, right? So if it's made of wood, what it's made of is an accident to its chairness, and what it feels like is an accident to its chairness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine, but I don't know that really holds up today. Like substance accidents, substance essence sort of talk.
Right.
I don't know. Are you familiar with this the substance accident stuff?
Yeah. I mean, in a philosophical way, but I agree. It's modern chemistry and physics and understanding of molecules and that sort of thing has sort of set it aside, and it doesn't really connect with our understanding of the real world anymore.
Because it comes from, ultimately, I think, and there's going to be people being like, well, not, because there's a lot of people that know a lot more about Aristotle than me. And I hear you. Yes, whatever. And you get to the weeds so quickly on this stuff with people.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't talk about it with people, and I only do it in a venue where I can only talk, and they cannot respond because they will just be off in the weeds instantaneously talking about some obscure. But so like it relies upon really the same. It relies upon atomic physics because they thought that there was that all elements, like you could be made of different stuff or whatever, but like people were certainly made of different elements, but that each element could be reducible down to a smallest unit, which could not be cut and divided any more.
Mm-hmm.
Because atom means uncuttable, right? And so they thought there was like a thingness, like an essential part, like an essential little non-reducible part of various elements, right? That you could then build up into different things. But we have cut the atom now.
Yeah.
And when you do cut the atom and you realize that all the atoms of all the various elements are made of identical interchangeable stuff. And so one proton from over there is the same as one proton from over there. And really, they may be the same proton if you subscribe to one electron theory. And so this sort of the sort of physical underpinnings of the philosophy have sort of been overturned. And then so when you still talk about, that's why they don't register with modern people anymore. And it's only the realm of academics and like people that wear they wear like quilted doublets to Latin mass.
Mm-hmm.
It's only those sorts of people who still talk about it.
Yeah.
And they're like, forsooth, these substance and accidents are different in mine lady's eyes.
Well, I think there's an interesting point here that even if you don't really know the physics, like myself, for example, the fact that our understanding of the material world and everything flowing from that has been built on that system, it's just as effective in alienating me from the ideas of substance and accidents.
Right.
Right. Like I don't have to understand the physics in order to be alienated from that idea as something that doesn't sound like it works.
Right, because like it's like and you don't even it's not even conscious for most people. Like they never sit down and say, "Oh, substance and accidents doesn't make sense because atoms are no longer irreducible."
Mm-hmm.
That sentence never comes to their mind. But when you say like you talk about like an essential thingness of a thing, people are like, and I understand, yes, again, in some way there's a thingness of a thing.
Right.
This is just nonsense. At some point it's like, yeah, okay, well, fine. But as far as like in the material world, it's very hard to see where that is. Right? Because now we know that atoms can be split. In the same way, our concept of infinity has changed, like with Benoit Mandelbrot. So he wrote down a set of simple rules which produce basically a randomly generated, infinitely repeating pattern that you can zoom in on or zoom out on forever and ever and ever, and it will always recur upon itself and come back to the same point. And it produces beauty inside itself. And and when you watch this stuff, there's weird stuff that happens while you're zooming through. Like there'll be patterns that appear like faces. There's one section of the Mandelbrot set that's called the Warring Angels because it looks like two separate winged beings facing each other.
Ooh.
And you go down and down and down. There's all these psychedelic colors. And then you get back to this little bulbous set that he started. And then you zoom down some more and you do that for another 30 minutes and you come out the other side and you're like, oh, look, there it is again. And so we have sort of conceptualized infinity in a way that was never done before. And like that sort of thing, there's like Thomas Aquinas's cosmological argument, where he talks for God, his cosmological proof of God, relies, taking again from Aristotle, upon this idea of that an infinite regress of causes is not valid. Mm-hmm. Like you can't have an infinite regress of movers. There must be an unmoved mover.
Yeah. And
again, anytime you say that, people that really know about Aquinas are going to be like, well, that's not technically right because it's basically the right idea. Mm-hmm. Right? There's an unmoved. But then you say, well, but I have now actually, I can visualize and put it on a computer and show you an infinitely repeating system that isn't 100. It's not like, because some guys still had to make up the rules for it, but so it's not 100% self-contained, but it's so close that you could imagine that a system of self-contained infinity could just exist. Right? It's like so close you could imagine that the universe goes on forever and eventually just loops back around to the start.
Right.
Right. And you could see that now. And so like this, it's like that may not be true. It may not be what happens, but we can prove that it's at least conceptually within the realm of possibility, mm-hmm. which is not something they could do back then. So our concept of what atoms are, what elements are, like what the fundamental being of things are is different. Our concept of infinity is different. And so when people try to take old metaphysical explanations and philosophical explanations, this was, I think the biggest Catholics in the past 200-ish years, was that they called for in the beginning. Oh, I don't remember really. It was around Vatican one time, but a little earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And they called for like a reemergence and a refocus on Aquinas, who was an Aristotelian, to shore up waning faith in the beliefs, in the Catholic beliefs, like to provide the intellectual foundation for it. Because science was progressing and was doing all these things. And what they should have done was say, okay, Aquinas good, but we basically need a new Aquinas.
Right.
Because we have a new physics and we need a new metaphysics. Right? And that's what we're trying to do on this show. Are me or Smokestack the new Thomas Aquinas? No. Not making that claim.
Hope
not. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to become a meme factory. Like not like a dumb picture on the internet, but like a meme is an idea. And we're going to churn out these memes of things that might be and throw them out into the world and hopefully create an intellectual environment in which that next new Thomas Aquinas and new Aristotle can emerge. We're trying to fertilize the new Aquinas.
That's what our show is, fertilizer. Our show is
fertilizer for the future.
There you go.
You know, and I don't think maybe Smokestack is the new Aquinas. I'm not sure. Could be. I'm not. Maybe Culture Builder is.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't think Ron Swanson is. But
I wouldn't rule him out. I wouldn't rule him out.
So we need, and rather than go back to the past, they should have pushed forward into the future with instead of going back and like, let's shore up our intellectual foundations with Aquinas. Because I'm not against going back to the past. I go back to the past all the time. I read about knights and old saints and, people sitting on top of a stalactite for 1,000 years or whatever, all the time, because I believe there's great stuff to be mined from that. Mm. But at the same time, I see people get nervous. They get nervous because so many of their beliefs, and everybody does this, whether you're Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, Jew, so many of their beliefs were formed under a time of different physics and different metaphysics. They have a fear that if they re-examine the metaphysics under the guise of the new physics, that belief will no longer be tenable. And so they fear doing this, right?
Right.
But I believe that that one of my fundamental beliefs is that if from any angle, if you examine things honestly and truthfully, you'll come to the truth. And so what is true, what they figured out was true under an old metaphysics, can be re-understood, and you'll get to the same place.
Yeah.
Under a new metaphysics, but you need the new metaphysics to get there.
Right.
Right. You have to go through that process. And I believe that they can be harmonized, and you can harmonize old metaphysics with new metaphysics, and the different points of view can all point to the same thing. But it's going to get messy when you do it. It's going to get messy, and for a while, it may seem like we're changing up everything. It's not, but you just got to have faith it's going to come out in the wash. Because you don't know how to explain the thing until you figured out the metaphysics. And while you're figuring it out, the route there may be very messy. But you just gotta, you gotta be brave enough to do it. I think this is one reason that the right has lost so much ground. It's because they've been unwilling, out of this basic fear, to re-examine fundamental thing. Because if you listen to leftists, the whole argument of leftism basically comes from like, well, in the past they thought that the moon was made of cheese, and therefore now transgenderism. That's what it comes down to, because it's like, well, they were wrong in the past,
right?
So therefore, all things in the past were wrong.
Right. But they weren't wrong in the past. They were actually right in the past, because every system of physics is right at a certain scale.
Correct.
And so we're operating at a different scale with science and technology and our technologically based society that we're all living in. And so we had to come up with new physics, or the new physics created the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It suits our way of living and understanding the natural world and our modes of interacting with it. Just as Newtonian physics did before that, and then Aristotelian physics did before that. And then one day, probably, our physics are going to be outmoded because the scale will change. Maybe we'll go back the other direction. Maybe we'll go back to Newtonian physics because all the computers decided to nuke themselves with an EMP, and we lose it all. Because if we didn't have the level of technology that we have, we wouldn't need the physics that we have.
Right. And we wouldn't be, yeah. And so really, this is why quote unquote social quote unquote progress is so linked to technological quote unquote progress.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so, like, this is why it's so hard to intertwine, because as people have noted, if you introduce technology into traditional societies, like places in Africa, for example, they rapidly take on modern cultural mores and ways.
Yep.
Like very rapidly. And that's because it's all connected. The technology points to, even if people don't cognize it, even if it's just subconsciously, the technology points to a way of viewing the physical world that is different from the past. Like if you just have streaming, like all around me now are these invisible vibrations, these invisible vibes that are communicating the Wi-Fi across the, I mean, what you and I are doing right now is basically telepathy.
Yeah.
It's digital telepathy. I'm giving you my mind information across a vast distance through the internet, which is in many places communicated just through invisible waves in the air.
Yeah.
This is why when technology started taking off in people's personal lives, it's one reason, and also the drugs, that people started talking about vibes in terms of vibrations. It was half LSD, it was half radio.
Right. Which is, they're really the same thing.
They are really the same thing. And in fact, Benoit Mandelbrot's things were probably, his conclusions were probably, and inventions helped by the aids of acid. As you know, I mean, in all seriousness, the computer revolution was driven by LSD.
Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. It was. Yes. There is a fantastic documentary about this called The Net, and I will link it down in the show notes.
Right. And so even if a traditional person with no education in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, if he's just given an iPhone with a cell phone tower signal, the very existence of it, even if he can't explain how it works and he can't like consciously understand it, it challenges his traditional physics, which then, again, often just subconsciously, starts to break down his traditional metaphysics.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that's the place where we are. And so you have to realize that, like Hildegard van Bingen, I love her, she's great. However, she's talking about the heat of dragon blood, and maybe dragons used to be real. I don't know. She talks about it like she's seen one. And she talks about like, here's one: the slow worm is cold, and while alive, it does not harm people. It has no utility or is valuable for medicine. After it is dead, people will be injured by its poison if they even touch or eat it. What is a slow worm? I don't know. It's something that we don't even really know about anymore, Or here's something about the basilisk, the viper, the tree frog, how to put moles in poison. It's just, this is a different look on the physical world than we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And her metaphysics, I'm sure, was quite complete and felt quite harmonious and perfect that she was working under. But if you try to take the metaphysics from her and you put it on today, it's not going to work, and people don't respond to it.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's true, like this is like even if you think it doesn't need any updating at all, it won't resound with people.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make the new metaphysics. And again, that's going to be scary for a lot of people who are not accustomed to rebuilding worldviews in half an hour. It's going to be scary for a lot of people, but just this is what faith is really, is having faith having faith is basically going forward confident that the truth is going to come out in the wash.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically, if you had to put it, it's like just continue, just go forward, and look, God may die in this process a couple of times. It's like Heisenberg said, the first drink of the physical sciences will turn you into an atheist, but God is waiting for you at the dregs.
Interesting.
Heisenberg said that. It's the same thing, because Heisenberg was dealing with these problems front on, because he was like, wait, position and momentum, there's an inherent unknowability
Mm-hmm.
in the world, and there's these, he was dealing with all the spooky motion at a distance and things jumping around, and quantum mechanical world, which is really throwing his metaphysics into the thing. And so he said that famous quote toward the end of his life. He said, if you the start of the physical sciences, the first sip will turn you into an atheist, but if you keep going, God is waiting for you at the dregs. Because when we do our new metaphysics, and the new Thomas Aquinas does come along to reshape it, because look, Thomas Aquinas was very controversial in his time, just FYI, because he was operating in the same thing. He was having to he was dealing with a cultural shift where the old explanations for things weren't quite working anymore.
Yep.
And so he was trying to re-examine them and say, well, here's how they work given our new understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that has to be done again. And for a while, it's going to seem like, maybe that kills some dogmas that you really believe in. Maybe that makes you, God will die, but that's okay. Just keep going forward, because God always resurrects again. It'll come out. It's going to be fine. It's the phoenix. God will die, but that's what the religion is based on.
Mm-hmm.
Is killing God and then knowing it's okay.
Yeah.
And so just go forward some more, and then you're going to find it at the other side. But what happens is people get to a point where they fear that they're going to kill God, and they stop, or they kill him and then they just stop.
Yeah.
And what you do is you keep pushing, just keep going. Right.
You gotta go see the empty tomb after 3 days.
Exactly. You can't just sit in the house mourning and going back to being a fisherman all day.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, well, I guess we'll just go back to fishing, being an atheist or whatever. You say, well, you may have to do that for a little bit, and then you keep going, right? And that's why you have to not uncover your father's nakedness.
Great transition there.
It's going to make sense.
Perfect sense.
All right, so Pajot did a great video on this, and I thought I would tie it in. So, do you remember the story of Noah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Noah, he gets drunk this is after the flood. They leave this part out of the children's books.
Yeah.
Noah, after the flood, he gets drunk, understandably so, because he just lived through a worldwide genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little sad that everyone died, and all the animals and all the plants. And he's very upset because he's living in a giant wasteland of post-apocalyptic destruction. And so he gets some wine for goodness sakes after his first harvest, and he just goes a little crazy.
Yeah.
Now, I don't hold it against him. But he gets naked, and he's in the tent, and he has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? And Ham goes in, and he sees him naked. And instead of covering him up, he comes out and he tells his other 2 brothers. And Shem and Japheth take a robe, and they walk backwards into the tent so they don't see their father, and they cover him up, right? And then when Noah sobers up, he curses Ham forever. And you think, what was the deal here? That's because, see, Ham was the first SJW. And Shem and Japheth were the first sex abuse cover-uppers and the first Holocaust deniers. And we have to walk that balance.
What?
I know. Okay. So, so the idea of covering up, so everyone's father, both your biological dad, your extended ancestry into the past, your whole culture, they've done bad things.
Mm.
All of them, right? There's no getting around that. No matter who you are, whether your ancestors were Vikings or Zulus or Han Chinese, they've all done bad things, often pretty bad things, right? Like if you're descended from the Aztecs, your fathers used to rape and pillage neighboring tribes and cut their hearts out atop a temple and roll their heads down the pyramid. But the correct answer to that is, well, who hasn't done that? Because all of our forefathers did such things in the past, right? It's like, you can't just because the correct answer when someone brings that up is like, well, yeah, or the same thing. It's like, well, your ancestors practiced slavery. It's like, yeah, and everybody.
Yeah. Everybody
right?
did. Yep.
That's your fathers did genocide. Yeah, well, so did everybody. I don't know what you just. I mean, like the Bantus in Africa are now the largest sub-Saharan African group because of the Bantu expansion, which is a polite way of saying the Bantu genocide of people that weren't Bantus.
Yeah.
Right. So this like constant harping on things of the past, it's like it's all true, right? So no matter who you are, and that whether it be near or far, like your direct biological dad or someone more generations away, there's unseemly stuff you don't want to look at, right? But here's the thing. So to some extent, and what an SJW is someone that always, so that's the nakedness of your father. And an SJW always wants to point and look at the nakedness and say, look how bad it is. Look how bad it is. Their ham coming out of the tent being like, Dad is drunk and he's just a slob and his genitals are all weird and he's got a mole. Look at the mole on him and he's wrinkled. Look at it. That's what ham is doing, right? And that's the SJW mindset. Is like, look at the past and point at all the bad things. Ignore the good things.
Yep.
Just hyper focus on the bad.
Yep.
He's uncovering the shame of his father. Okay. Now, Shem and Japheth. So he's the first SJW, but Shem and Japheth are the first people that are the first cover-uppers. Literally, they cover up their father. All right, so to some extent, like living in a fallen world requires that you pretend that the nakedness is not there.
Yeah.
Imagine, for example, you live in a family, as most of us do. Shouldn't be that hard to imagine that part. But imagine that your grandfather was a person that did some awful thing. Like, I don't know. Everyone, they strongly suspect he was a serial rapist in his 20s, but he got away with it. And there was a police investigation and they couldn't nail him. So he's been walking free ever since. Or pick your vice of choice instead of rape, murder, or I don't know, cheating at poker, something.
Professional sports fandom.
Yeah, those are all on the same scale. Cheating at poker, serial rapist.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the proper thing to do at family reunion during Christmas time? Right? So let's imagine there's two sons, Michael and David. And Michael comes over. He gives Granddad a hug. Nice to see you. How are you? Hey, Mom. Love you both. The sister getting here soon. Okay. So Michael knows that his dad was a serial rapist, murderer, arsonist, his granddad, but he's not going to bring it up all the time.
Yeah.
Because it would be harmful for the family. He's not unaware of his family's misdeeds, but for his family to hang together, to some extent, he has to walk in backwards and put the robe over him. People do this all the time. That's why a lot of people don't like going to Christmas, is because they have things in there. They have to go to see their family, and there's all these skeletons in the closet they have to ignore.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe, hopefully, for most of our listeners, the skeletons in their closet aren't as bad as Dad's a serial rapist. Right? But, they're there. So then a couple hours later comes over son B, David, and David knocks on the door. He's a little bit drunk, a decision he's made so that he feels more courageous to tell off his grandfather. And he gets there and all he wants to talk about is how he's like, his dad raped women in the 70s. They're like, joy to the world. And he's like, what about Melissa? What about Catherine? Is it true what he said? And the grandson, I don't want to talk about it. And he can't let it go to move on. Right?
Yeah.
And so he's being a ham. And so, but here's the thing. What you got to say is that many of us would feel just some level of justification with both of those sides, right? Because there's like, like you can understand what both of them are doing. Like, so to some extent, like when your family and your family may be an extended group, like for instance, the Catholic Church. There was a reason that people were so willing to not talk about the abuse scandal for so long, because they don't want to bring shame upon their fathers, their organ. I mean, I don't mean like their fathers in the sense of priests. I mean like their people, their ancestry, their group.
Yeah.
They don't want to make the shame of their group public.
Right.
And and that's how how they have the cover-ups. That's how cover-ups start. Because just like Shem and Japheth, you walk in backwards and you put the thing over it and you just don't look at it. You pretend it's not there. Okay. That's how they that's how cover-ups work, and that's why so many people are willing to do it. It's also why, Sandusky. Everyone, because no one wanted to bring shame upon their institution that they all loved.
Yeah.
And be like, well, there's the head coach is like a serial child rapist. And so they just didn't say anything.
Right.
Because it brings a lot of shame and embarrassment, and they hope all the time for other ways to deal with it that aren't public. Right. So but in that case, the cover-up is bad, right? And Ham would be correct.
Right.
So you have to find a line where, for me, like in our country, like it used to be common practice that you wouldn't talk about the bad things that a president did. Like, yeah, okay, JFK was having affairs all the time. Most of the presidents were in the past. We only really got upset about it with Bill Clinton as social unity started to break down. Because in the past, it was like, well, we just all agree we're not going to talk about the president's private indiscretions for the good of the country, because we don't want to bring shame upon each other. We want the president to be someone everyone can respect, and he has authority, and they can look up to him and follow what he says. That's completely gone now, right? All we do is talk about presidents and presidential candidates' private indiscretions, because we're all Ham and we're no Shem and Japheth. We're just all Ham. But to some extent, see, the cover-up is necessary so that the institutions and the family and that can still function, so that people can still have respect for them. But you have to find a line where you say, like, well, okay, but I'm not going to cover up this. Like for me, in our country, it was like satanic pedophiles. I was like, well, that's probably a line too far. And we have to now start talking about this openly.
Yeah.
Right? Or doing fake wars. It's really bad.
Well, did the thing happen in the past, or is it happening now? Can someone be saved from harm by bringing it up? Can real restitution be done? Because if the person that did the thing is dead, and the person that they did it to is dead, and their children had nothing to do with it, you can play the Ham game, but you'll also destroy the family. Because it needs to be known that if you ham long enough, you're going to destroy the family.
If you ham long enough, but you do need a little ham.
Sometimes you do need a ham, but it better be for something that's actually needs to be addressed and is addressable. Like Noah having a rough day, getting drunk in his tent. Like he didn't. I mean, I guess he sinned by becoming so intoxicated that he was laying around naked. But he can apologize for that later to somebody to Ham that stumbled in and saw something he didn't want to see. But for Ham to then parade his father and shame him in front of the rest of the family, that's the kind of thing that tears a family apart. And that is, you're right, that is the SJW thing. Right.
But see, so you got to give the devil his due, because the justification for like all this political correct speech is basically, while they're being a ham in one regard, they're trying to not be a ham in another regard, because we all know various different groups of people have various problems. Like, for example, violent crime is worse in the black community.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this. It's taboo to say so, in part for a very good reason, is that you don't want to be constantly pointing at the faults and nakedness, the problems of your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be exposing your neighbor's nakedness. Why? Because your community also has nakedness you prefer other people weren't constantly pointing at.
Yeah.
Right? So to give the devil his due, there's a real legitimate justification for quote unquote PC speech, like, which is just right. And it has its place. But again, you have to also balance that with, because they want to be ham on some people and Japheth on other people. Completely cover some, completely point at the nakedness of others.
You can be quote unquote PC in your speech out of love and sympathy for your neighbor and not wanting to just publicly shame them and destroy the family.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, God talks about doing this exact thing. He talks about, like, at some point he gets so angry he's going to expose his people's nakedness.
Mm-hmm.
He says that exactly, like, I'm going to expose your nakedness to the world. But in other times he's talking about he's going to cover them with various garments and robes.
Yep. So
that people can't. It's the same. That idea of being covered versus uncovered, right? And so there are cover-ups, like conspiracy cover-ups, which have a basis in a not bad motive. It's a Shem and Japheth motive. And there are people that scream about problems, which also have their basis in the not terrible. Like they've said their cover-up's gone too far.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time when Shem and Japheth wrap around to their being the bad ones now, and you need the ham. And that's why, you can't get too, you have to just let the margins hang. Because, like, a lot of one of the reasons that SJW has so much power is because the Shem and Japheth part was so strong in the past of covering up the problems that people got sick of the hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gave it fuel to begin, right? And
well, like, if your Shem and Japheth thing is preventing justice from being done, then there's a problem that needs to be addressed. So really, a lot of this, like finding out where the line is, that's your definition of justice, what justice is.
Yeah.
And so in this country, we've got a couple different definitions of justice operating at the same time, which is a lot of the source of conflict. Yeah.
And so, and like, when you think about, like, why did this, like, how did the very sort of outwardly facing, ordered and covered America of the mid 20th century, which was very, like, religious, and it had very strict social mores and sexual mores, how did that turn into this? Well, it's because, in part, that was only the outward covering. But inwardly, people were having affairs, they were cheating on each other. There was all this inner hypocrisy that drove the baby boomers to call it out.
Right.
The baby boomers didn't come out of nowhere. The baby boomers come out of a culture that was so much Shem and Japheth covering of their father's sins and their own sins, but privately having them all. And, that they were driven sort of mad by the hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
And they just started, and that's where this modern leftward trend began. And so you can't, and so one of the things that people err on the other side is they want to cover up too much, to, like, paper over and make it seem like they want to do it by stamping out all of the problems.
Well, if you use your patriarchal privilege to escape justice for your own sin, then you create that. You drive your descendants insane with your hypocrisy, and they end up being SJWs against you.
Yeah, and it's because see, like, part of it is this lack of that hypocrisy was so strong. That's why people, they don't understand covering up things today. Really, like we get the sense that it would be something of a dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's such a push and demand that every weird sexual fetish be out in the open and celebrated, because they don't want to do anything behind closed doors. They feel like if you do something behind closed doors, it's bad. Like, it's not what you're doing that's bad, it's that it's behind closed doors, because that is the path for hypocrisy, is the idea. And at least if we're out in the open about it, the thinking goes, although it's not true, we can't be hypocritical about it.
Right.
And it's just like, where our culture is just, it's all open, right? And that's why people have a problem with censorship, because they're like, well, if you don't want to be censored, then you obviously have something you're doing in secret that's bad. Like, what are you doing that you don't want us to see? We've lost all that. We're always like, doing things but it doesn't even have to be bad for you to not want people to always be looking at what you're doing.
Right. It might just be undignified.
Yeah, it might just be undignified. But so one of the problems with like the 50s is that people wanted to stamp out all of the weirdness, right? And this is like so, and this goes back to Hildegard, right? Because in a way, though you may not follow me on this one.
Okay.
This goes back to Hildegard, because I'm gonna try to make this make sense. It goes back to Hildegard because we don't, like, Hildegard had her metaphysics that was complete, and we don't want to. Let's start this way. There were trannies in the 50s, right? There were cross-dressers in the 50s. There were all of these quote unquote new things have always been there.
Yeah.
But they kept a lid on them. But see, what they did was they did it too much. You have to, when you try to have a system that controls it all, it becomes a breeding ground for the hypocrisy, which feeds all the hams. Because all of that's going on, like J. Edgar Hoover wearing women's shoes, in the walk, prancing around the Oval Office. Everyone has heard about that.
Yeah.
And so there was this, but the public face was this very straight lace, like we're all, and so that level of cover up leads to this level of hypocrisy. And what you got to do is say, well, you got to you can't totally cover everything up. Like, this is a lot of you can't do that. You can't do that morally and socially, but you also can't do that physically. This is what I was trying to say, metaphysically. One of the problems is people want to cover up all the problems. They want to pretend like their system is sound and complete. But that just makes all the holes glaring in it glow so much more. Right? And this is why no one really likes Thomas Aquinas people, because they pretend like they have a total system, which accounts for everything, and it never does. Like, your system never accounts for anything. And this is why the Jews in the Old Testament, the Israelites, always had to leave things unfinished. Like the end of their prayer shawl, you didn't finish those. You didn't collect the edges of the field. You always left the edges unfinished, because they always have to be blurred. And so you always have to say, like, this is how you get back to a sane society, is you say, like, look, yes, there's always going to be people that are transsexuals, right? And we're not gonna celebrate it, but we're not gonna stamp it out viciously either.
And we're not gonna pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
There's a difference between pretending it doesn't exist and preserving the dignity of your society.
Right. And if it, we can all maybe acknowledge that J. Edgar Hoover or some other presidents, or maybe your own father, or whatever the case may be, had a time where he dressed up in a dress. This is the thing. Like, this outwardly facing one thing, covering up so much hypocrisy. Look at don't do this if you're offended by sexual images, but look up World War II sexual indiscretions or something like that. There are all these photos of World War II sailors who we think of as like this very, 1940s, straight haircut, doing weird things on aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
And other such places in the field. Like the Germans were dressing up. They had drag shows in the German army and the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, well, who would be less likely to have a drag show?
Right.
But it's because that was one of the great problems of the Germans and the Nazis is they wanted this total control to stamp out all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But that just highlights them more. Right.
Yeah.
This is why David got punished in one of the books of the Bible. I forget which one, but he wanted to. He says God curses him because he's taking a census.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, why would that be? But it's because it's implied that he's trying to get a handle on everything. He's trying to control it all.
Yeah.
And when you try to do that, you like this is how we get back to normal. Is that you have to realize that even the most deranged of the left has its place in the sort of divine order, which is that it's there for a reason. It's part of the plan.
Mm.
And it's like a fertilizer because like a lot of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture, the LSD, all of that did birth the computer revolution. It did birth our new physics, which is going to give birth to our new metaphysics. And so in a way, they're springboarding the next religious revolution and revival. It's just a long path to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to balance the covering and uncovering of your father, the new and old metaphysics, and remember to leave the tassels on the end of your prayer shawl unfinished. Never try to finish. Don't, like the Japanese are great at this because they understand the leaving the edges unfinished. They do that in their art all the time,
mm-hmm.
which is why when we see their paintings, like it doesn't go to the edge of the canvas,
right,
or whatever, because it's like just don't, just leave that bit on the edge, leave that to God. Just there's people on the margins of society and always will be, and you don't have to do anything about them. Just because what we want to do now is we want to take all the margins and make them the center.
Mm.
Like
mm-hmm.
anyone that's on the margin of society or any idea on the margin of society, we want to put it at the center.
Right.
Whether that's like, do you see how rapidly Black Lives Matter transformed into Black Trans Lives Matter?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because Black people weren't on the margins enough.
Right.
There's like, well, but there's someone on even the more margins of them, so let's get them and put them in the center.
Yep.
And that's where this comes from, is this fear of, it's so much cover up that it's a fear of hypocrisy, because the 40s and 50s and the 30s had a lot of hypocrisy that bursts a generation that then rebels against it so hard they want to take all the margins and put them at the middle, so there's none of that.
Yeah, it's like, imagine you've got a Frisbee and you try to turn it inside out.
Yeah.
You can apply a lot of force and destroy your Frisbee, but you're not going to turn it into, you're not going to take the edge and put it in the center. Right.
Exactly. And this, so I think that I made that make sense.
I think so too.
I knew it was there, but I wasn't quite sure I was going to make it. Like I was sitting there like, I know there's a connection between Hildegard and not finishing your tassels and ham.
Mm-hmm.
And SJWs, but I wasn't quite sure. But I think I got it. I got a rough approximation. Someone will make that better point later. Like I said, this is a seed. I threw it out there.
Just
somewhere.
Fertilizing.
The next Thomas Aquinas is going to listen to it and say, man, I could really clean that up and make that better.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to make it into a pithy one-line sentence.
Mm-hmm.
That he's going to write in Neo-Latin or whatever.
Right.
With his cyborg brain. And it's going to be great.
So, no cyborg brain, please.
So how long have we been going? Is this a long show already?
It's an hour and 23 minutes.
Oh, I'll keep talking.
Okay, that's good because I didn't have the outro ready.
Okay, good. Well, I can talk about. Should we talk about the psychology of devils or fifth generation warfare?
Fifth generation warfare.
Okay, I'll talk about the psychology of devils next time.
Okay.
And I'm gonna show everybody why they want blood sacrifice and stuff. Like people are like, well, why would demons care if you do a weird ritual? And it's like, I'm gonna show you why they care.
Interesting.
It's very simple and also very dark. But see, I somewhat hesitate because then once I explain it, people are like, whoa, well now I know the best way to summon demons. But don't summon. Just
Yeah,
I'm
maybe
gonna
we
have to
ought
trust
to.
you with.
Maybe
I'm
we
gonna
ought to
trust you
think
with
about
this
that.
knowledge. I'm gonna trust you with this knowledge of how to summon demons and why
No,
it worked. But don't summon demons, culture creator.
don't do it.
Don't do it, Ron Swanson. You know who's most likely to do it is Chungus.
Yeah,
He's most likely to summon the devil. But
don't,
anyway,
Chungus, please control yourself.
all right. So there was a thread going around about fifth generation warfare by Real Boy Physical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at Real Boy Physical. And it was good. So what is that, and why does it matter to us? And because you are all now soldiers in the fifth generation war. Sorry, you've been transcripted
Yeah, indeed.
against your will, but here we are. You know, it's like the king's coin in the old days. The British would come to Ireland and they'd offer all the drunk British youth a beer, you know, and they say,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'll buy you a beer." And I don't know why the British guy has an Irish accent, but "Hey, buy you a beer, sonny, laddie." I said, "Oh, great. Are you the army recruiter? Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about the army." Buys him a beer. The Irish lad drinks his Guinness down, and at the bottom of it is a coin. He's like, "Well, you've just accepted your first payment from the king, so now you're transcripted." I'm like, that used to happen.
Wow.
Because legally, under the thing, like if you took the money from the guy, you'd accepted the payment, and it was this total shystery nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it happened, and that's what's happened to you. You're all in it now. The recruiter has brought you a digital beer, and you drunk it down, and now here you are. I'm sorry to tell you. So what's fifth generation warfare? Okay. There was this idea going around turn of the century, our century, 21st century. It was mostly a small group of bloggers at the beginning, but their thinking is sort of, I think, now been taken up by the Pentagon and all major militaries. And the idea, a la General, we salute him, Alex Jones, who's always been 20 years ahead of everybody else, is that the future conflicts are more information rather than physical. Right? There's a war on for your mind, he screams, because he's info war, because that's true. So the thinking goes as follows. All right, warfare up to the present can be divided into 5 generations. Each generation of warfare is designed to neutralize the former generation. So an army operating at second gen tactics completely takes away the ability of a first generation army to operate at all. And an army with third generation tactics likewise neutralizes an army with second generation tactics, and so on. So first generation warfare was basically the model of war from prehistory until the Industrial Revolution. It was a very simple concept of armies with weapons charging at each other and trying to put sharp bits of metal into each other. And toward the end with bullets, like, you know, muskets and whatever. That's why even after the invention of muskets and cannons, armies still basically lined up and just took it head on. Because that was it was the most effective means of battle. It's just line up and fire what you got.
Yep.
Right? And that's still sort of archetypically in our minds what war is. You know, it's like you line up and you just go. Okay, but the second generation, because the Industrial Revolution came about around the time of World War I and relied on machine guns and long-range artillery. Because if you think about it, what do those two things do? They completely negate the ability of an army to line up and attack. Like, you can't just stand in a big glob and march at the enemy anymore. If you have artillery and machine guns going, you just get mowed down.
Yeah.
And if you look at photos from World War I, they didn't realize this yet. They began World War I, and they look like people out of history. Like, the French have big fancy plumes on their hats, and the British have big bright coats and shoulder pads with tassels, and they have these curly mustaches. And they're all great. They look fantastic because they're preparing for first generation warfare, and they don't know they've gone into second generation yet. And at the end of World War I, they come out looking very much like modern soldiers. They're wearing helmets. They're wearing all gray or brown to blend in with the dirt. You know, they're clean shaven so they can fit a gas mask over their face. The armies have completely morphed in the span of 4 years. You know, because they were like, we're going to go to war. And then it was like, wow, every side got turned into hamburger meat in the span of seconds. And this is something totally different than what we used to do. And that's why it just became like there was no marching. You just got in a hole and sat there. The second generation warfare completely neutralized first generation tactics. Just totally, it just made it invalid. It's like, what are you talking about? We can't do that. It just invalidated thousands of years of warfare instantly. Okay, third generation warfare was more or less World War II. And it was the Blitzkrieg, or the Lightning War. Mm-hmm. And this was because by this point, motorized vehicles had gotten very good. And so you could use tanks and you could use airplanes. And you could drive really fast. And so you say, well, they may have artillery and machine gun nests, but we'll just drive around them and shoot them and shoot whatever they're defending before they can even pack up and move. Because those things are big and heavy. Mm-hmm. And we're just going and then before they can even get there to shoot us with their machine guns, we're driving on to the next target. And that's what Lightning War was. And that's why World War II was so chaotic, because people were moving at high speeds all over the place, trying to outflank each other. It's high mobility war, right? So you went from like marching war to no movement whatsoever to super fast movement. Mm-hmm. And that was third generation. And third generation tactics basically, again, made second generation warfare tactics completely useless. People stopped putting up artillery shells. I mean, they still had a place, but it wasn't like nests that just sat there forever. You'd have to pick them up and move them, and they would, they were much more limited utility. Okay, so after the Lightning War, third generation, what do we have? We have fourth generation warfare, which is basically what most of us have been accustomed to most of our lives, mm-hmm. which is guerrilla warfare. Yep. How do you beat a lightning warfare? How do you beat that? Well, you take away whatever they were shooting at. Mm-hmm. You take away the uniforms completely. You take away the ranks. People they dress like regular citizens now, and they take pot shots at you when you're not looking, and they plant IEDs in the road. And people call this terrorism because it's a way of delegitimizing it, but it's really just the next way that wars have to be fought. Yeah.
Snipers were regarded as terrorists in Civil War.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's really just, and I often sound like I'm an ISIS apologist. And I'm not. I'm just saying, from their perspective, what they're doing is just fighting a war against a people with way more resources. And the way that you do that is through these quote unquote terror means. Mm-hmm. Because they don't stand a chance fighting a war if they line up in a big glob, and they don't have the tanks and the stuff to fight. So what do? They just the next logical conclusion is say, well, we'll just take away whatever the third generation army is made to shoot at. And all standing armies today that nations have and countries have are third generations, basically. Mm-hmm. And all of the little terror cells they can't beat are fourth generation. So you can have a much smaller force, and it just sort of invalidates the tactics. It's like, well, yeah, you got all that stuff, but what are you going to shoot at? Mm-hmm. We all look like civilians. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? And we may live in your town. Who knows? Yeah. We don't. Where are you going to aim your guns? And that invalidates the third generation warfare and makes the situation very different. All right, so now we get to fifth generation warfare, because how do you stop that? You control the information that people are able to access and share. Because if you do that, you can destroy the motives for people forming guerrilla cells, which is where we are now. This is why, say, the FBI considers quote unquote white nationalist groups to be the most threatening thing, even though they don't really do very much, is because from their perspective, as fifth generation warfare fighters, they have to constantly keep all such information that could lead to the formation of such a cell down, because the potential for that is very high in their view. Okay. Right. So they feel like they've gotten for the time being, they've gotten the Middle East under control by completely destroying the information. That's what the Arab Spring was, really. Mm-hmm. They destroyed the information around it so much and distorted it and controlled the narrative so much that ISIS and Taliban has more trouble forming. Because people, what are you mad about? Like, they're like, what are you mad about? It's not us. It's your lack of democracy.
I think one thing you have to pause and consider when looking at the FBI and white nationalism is that it's a slur for populist uprising against, because of discontent with government and the way the country's being run. And so you can't just call it that because it admits they have a valid critique. So you slur them all as white nationalists.
Which is the InfoWars, yeah.
But the information that they're suppressing to prevent these so-called white nationalists from rising up the information doesn't have anything to do with race or race relations. The information has to do with government corruption and all that kind of stuff. They just call it, but it's a slur. It's like the alt-right was a slur, and the Southern Baptists, condemned the alt-right until they realized at the end of it, oh, we are the alt-right. It doesn't mean what we thought it meant to be called that, and it's that same sort of thing. So that's the other reason the FBI is so spun up about this, is because they're using it as code for something else.
Which shows you how effective that fifth generation tactics are, because you prevent any enemies from forming into groups by making them all not want to be part of whatever group that they are actually in your mind.
Right, because everybody says, well, I'm not a racist. I don't want to be anywhere near those people. And the thing is, well, they're actually not racist either. None of them, nobody's racist. This is something else entirely that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and so you cook it up, and then you prevent people from organizing to even form the fourth generation war cell that your third generation army can't handle, by making it so that it's, even just at the level, it's just uncool to think those things. Yeah. Or you're weird, or you have social. This is why there's so much censorship and controlling the narrative, because all of you are trying to manipulate you toward to supporting the ends that they want, so that there is no fourth generation warfare cell to spring up to challenge their power. Right. And so you're all in this now. This is why there's so much lies. This is why because all of it, and everybody does this. Russia is doing that to some degree. China is doing. They're all feeding us misinformation all the time. Mm-hmm. They're all lying about what they're doing. They're lying about what they think we're doing. They're lying about, because they all want to manipulate your perception in order that you are ineffective at challenging their power. Mm-hmm. Right? Alex Jones is right when he says there's a war on for your mind. He saw this coming a long way away. And this is why you have to, you're in it now. And there's no really getting out of it. And you just got to be much smarter. I think this is one reason they want everybody fat and on these weird chemicals, because a dumb population is even easier to misinform. Yeah. Yeah. And the cognitive changes that come along that are corollary to the physical changes make people easier to deal with. Yeah. Yeah. So you're all fifth generation warfare. Just be aware of it and understand what's going on. And it's a big challenge. Again, this goes back to our metaphysics thing, because like, for instance, most Christians and also Muslims and Jews have had a concept of just war. Right. Like when a war was just and when it was unjust to fight. But that was based around, that philosophy, that metaphysics was based around a physics of first generation warfare, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Maybe second. And so then when you deal with like, well, when is it just now? And there's really no philosophical answers been offered. Yeah. They all just ignore the problem, really. And they don't acknowledge it's like, well, those terrorist groups are basically just fighting the most natural extension of the next phase of war. Mm-hmm. Right. And then all of this misinformation is, you're unwittingly, if you repeat it, and I've done it too, we've all repeated misinformation before online, and that is, you're involved in the war. There you go. Yep. I guess what I'm saying is, listen to InfoWars and buy a water filter. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if that's the solution, but I don't know what the solution is. Now we're in very weedy territory. Yeah. I don't know what the way out of, like, well, now instead of shooting each other, we're just going to lie all the time. I don't know how you get out of
Yeah.
that, because what they want to do is they want to use lies and lawfare and propaganda and economic constraints to try and just prevent any fourth generation things from forming. And that's fifth generation warfare. So I guess what we got to do is we got to come up with sixth generation warfare to outsmart the fifth generation warfare. And I don't know what that looks like.
Well, I think part of it, there's a philosophical component to it, which is don't doubt yourself. When you're say looking into a topic or asking a question that the media or the government says is racist, but you know in your heart that you're not even concerned with race issues at all, or bigoted or whatever. One of the buzzwords, racist, sexist, homophobic, blah 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 blah. If you know in your heart, like, no, this has nothing to do with this. It's not. I'm not a racist for being upset about voter fraud. Okay.
Right.
So I identify that when that word is used, that is fifth generation warfare tactics to keep you from connecting with other people that are also upset about voter fraud, for example, and maybe doing something about it.
This is why QAnon frightens them so much.
Yeah.
It's because QAnon is connecting people.
They've short-circuited the system.
Fifth generation warfare is designed to keep people from getting connected, to challenge narratives and power. And QAnon, perhaps the sixth generation warfare is just being a little insane.
Yeah.
So it doesn't phase you. And you're like, well, they're like, well, this is, and they're like, they're keeping kids on the moon.
Right. Well,
Chrissy Teigen has kids on the moon and she's eating them.
When you don't care about being called crazy or a bigot or a racist, it doesn't work anymore. Fifth generation warfare won't work on you if you don't care what you're called. Yes.
Now the problem is, one of the side effects of not caring if you're called crazy is you become a little crazy.
It's true.
But
you gotta watch out for that.
You gotta be able to swim your way back.
Yeah.
You gotta look.
It's murky waters we're swimming in here. And it's not, we didn't start that fight, but we're in it. So we got to figure out how to swim.
Look, QAnon is powerful. I don't think that Donald Trump is wading through tunnels under Manhattan, leading armies of freed children away in an Underground Railroad style thing from lizard people that they captured on the dark side of the moon, or whatever QAnon is on about now. Right. Nonetheless, that shield of insanity, and it may be a tactical shield of insanity. I don't know. It may be like someone just feigning. It's hard to say now.
Right.
Has shielded. So maybe we all got to be a little bit. Maybe we all got to be a little bit crazy. I don't know. Let's come up with something a little better though than Chrissy Teigen eating children on the backside of the moon.
Yeah.
Maybe she is. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure Benoit Mandelbrot felt a little crazy when he first started his investigations. Yeah, that's true. I don't. Maybe the answer is just maybe we needed the next LSD. Who knows? I don't know. Let's not. I'm hitting the button. It was fun. Send your mail. Mapsoc.org. Mapsoc.org. Send your mail. We didn't even talk about 5G. We didn't talk about vibes? 5G. Oh. I feel like it's been done. Yeah. True.